Alright, guys, we need to talk about Dark Souls 2, because it's not what you think it is. My name's Matt, also known as MTK, and this video is going to cover my experience with Dark Souls 2 and why I think you should not believe everything you hear about this game. So, for a little bit of context, I have beaten Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, Elden Ring, and Sekiro, and I've played Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, and I'm currently playing through Dark Souls 2, although I haven't beaten those yet. And although I wouldn't call myself a veteran of the Soulsborne games, I'm definitely not a newbie. So the things that I'm about to say aren't coming from a place of somebody with no experience in the Souls genre. So here's my experience. After beating Dark Souls 1, I decided to jump straight into Dark Souls 2. And everything that I'd heard at that point left me feeling like I was going to have to just endure this game until I could get through it to play Dark Souls 3. And I feel like that was misleading because I got to tell you, Dark Souls 2 is a pretty dang good game. Now, I know the haters out there might disagree with me on this, but the game itself is pretty fun. I'm about 20 to 30 hours in, and I haven't regretted 1 minute of it. It's been a great experience. So let's get into some of the things that I heard before I started Dark Souls 2 and why they're not that big a deal. Number 1, the healing. The healing animation in Dark Souls 2 takes quite a bit longer than the other Soulsborne games. And this is probably one complaint that actually has a pretty good point, especially in the early game. However, the stat adaptability, that is one of the new stats in Dark Souls 2, if you go ahead and just invest in that fairly soon and get that up to 15 or 20, it really negates a lot of that, and you don't run into that much in the middle or late game. So although it is a problem when you first start out, it's really not that big a deal if you just know how to allocate your stats right. Now, the other thing that is kind of related to this as kind of like a sub point is when you die in Dark Souls 2, you lose overall health. So when you rest at a bonfire, you don't get your entire health bar back. A chunk is missing, and then every time you die, another chunk is missing, all the way down to 50% of your health is the lowest it will go. And while that can be kind of annoying, there's a item called a human effigy that you pop, and it gives you all your health back. And then when you rest at a bonfire, it will negate that whole effect and start over from the beginning. And I've found that there are plenty of effigies throughout Dark Souls 2. I haven't had to go farm for them or try and find them. I just keep getting them. And so that complaint really didn't affect me much. When I first heard that, I was dreading. That was one of the things that made me dread playing Dark Souls 2 was that fact. But I found there's so many effigies around, it really doesn't matter. The second complaint I heard was that the enemy types were too similar. There wasn't enough variation in the enemy types. And I have to be honest, this complaint really, I have no idea where it came from because once I actually started playing the game, it seems like there's plenty of different types of enemies and different things that you run into. It definitely wasn't boring as far as the variation of enemies that you would have to defeat in the game. So where this came from, I don't really know, but that is something that I heard, and it kind of set me off from the game a little bit, but it's really not a problem. The third thing was that the stats are too confusing. There's several new stats that weren't in the first game. The relation between the stats is different, like adaptability and endurance scale together, kind of, and things like that. A lot of nuance in the stat system. And while I will say that it's not explained very well, it is pretty easily dealt with a couple YouTube searches. I definitely do recommend before you start Dark Souls 2 that you search a couple good stat videos that explain how the stats work. And then, but once you know that, it's really not a problem. It's just a matter of knowing where to put your stat points as you level up. And once you figure that out, you really won't have much of an issue. The last thing I'll cover is the level design. This was one thing that I heard. Basically, you're coming off of Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 is renowned for Firelink and how masterfully interconnected those levels are. And that's definitely true. It was awesome. But when you hit Dark Souls 2, I think that maybe it's not as good, but it's definitely not bad. And Majula is beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful hubs in the Souls games that I would say. And the level design is pretty well done. It's definitely better than most other games. Maybe not quite as good as Dark Souls 1, but you're not going to have a boring time with it by any means. So in conclusion, don't listen to the haters. Pick up Dark Souls 2, give it a try, make your own judgment on it. It really is a good game. You might like it, you might not. You take that risk with every game you get, but I'll say this, I'm having a great time, and I'm willing to bet you will as well. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any of this juicy content. I'm a new channel, so every bit of support counts. I'd appreciate it very much. Thanks, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Do it now, or I'll hunt you down. Smash like.